Space Jam, Space Jam, Space Jam, Space Jam. Alright.
Come on and slam, and welcome to the jam.
So lots of discourse around Space Jam New Legacy, a lot of which came before people even had a chance to see it. Lots of people making fun of the trailers and the clips, other people making fun of those people for being critical of a movie intended for children. Lots of people criticizing it for product and IP placement, and then other people countering, saying that the original Space Jam was exactly the same. And then the movie actually came out and these complaints just amplified. And I think both sides make some decent points, but just because something's intended for kids doesn't exclude it from criticism. Because there are tons of movies that are intended for kids that are great. We're also battling 90s nostalgia, which is tough. As a child of the 90s, I do think the 90s and early 2000s were a golden age to be alive. We had Gen 1 Pokemon, man, it wasn't the same. So I thought I'd take a look at the new movie, then watch the original, because it's been at least a decade, maybe two, since I've seen it. Compare the two and see which critiques stand up and which defenses may be a little bit more unfounded. Now, originally, I was going to be filming this in a theater room, and I was going to make a joke about hype cinema, because this is the location where my amazing Doritos mini fridge is being stored until I move into my new apartment, but I couldn't get the lighting to look good, so just pretend that we're in a theater room, and that was like a really good joke. But that brings us to today's sponsor, Doritos, a super refreshing drink to enjoy this fine summer while space jamming. Doritos doesn't just come in a glass bottle, it comes in a variety of natural flavors that are made with real sugar. Things like lime, mango, strawberry, and guava are just a fraction of the refreshing flavors that you can expect. And right now they have a mood pack available that comes with 12 flavors, including the elusive watermelon. After my last ad, a lot of people weren't aware that you could get Doritos all over the world and even in grocery stores, so if you're interested in trying Doritos out for yourself, click the link in the description down below and use the store locator to figure out where you can buy some Doritos near you. So I really liked Space Jam as a kid. I distinctly remember having some double feature days with Matilda. I would probably wear a Toon Squad jersey right now, and the soundtrack was amazing. I don't think it's objectively an amazing movie or some kind of work of art, but I remember liking it a lot, and so did all my friends. I remember solid loony comedy, the amazing soundtrack that I mentioned that I definitely owned on cassette, because I'm old, but it wasn't something that lasted through adulthood with me, like Recess, for example, which definitely still holds up and is awesome and I'm gonna make a video about someday. But I know that one of my close friends that is significantly more knowledgeable about movies than I am, Let Me Explain, always had this as one of his favorite movies, even to this day. So I figured that it must still stack up to some degree. Basically, what I'm trying to say is that I have fond memories of Space Jam. I have someone whose opinion I respect corroborating that enjoyment of Space Jam to this day. And I'm not somebody who inherently hopes for something to be bad, even if some videos might make it seem that way. There's a lot of movies that have come out this year that other people aren't really huge on that I've genuinely enjoyed to some degree. So when I say that I didn't like Space Jam 2 that much, know that it's coming from a place of honesty and someone who is genuinely hoping for a fun time, even if the movie itself ended up being rough. I even had a twisted tea before starting the movie so the good times would be more likely to roll. But I do think that it had a solid story at its heart, which we will get to, but I just don't think that it was that great of a movie or that enjoyable. So I was kind of expecting that something similar was gonna happen when I went to rewatch the original, but no, I think the original still stacks up in a lot of ways. Nothing amazing, but I did enjoy it. But there's specific reasons why I enjoyed it more, and yeah, some of it might come down to nostalgia, but I did notice some aspects of the original that were not great, like this scene with the kids.
Your dad's gonna play.
Oh, right! I had to double check to see if they just cast MJ's kids, which would have made this acceptable, but no, they didn't. So let's compare the base plot to what happened in each of these movies. In the original Space Jam, aliens from Moron Mountain run an amusement park the kids hate, and Swackhammer, played by Danny DeVito, I guess there was more of a through line to Matilda in this double feature I used to have than I thought, sends these adorable little alien bros to capture the Looney Tunes to be the park's new attraction. So Bugs Bunny convinces them that they need to be given a chance to defend themselves. And because these aliens are tiny with no real legs or arms, they pick basketball. But of course, those aliens aren't going to play fair, and they end up stealing the abilities of a series of pro NBA players to become the Monstars. And I totally forgot about the side story with the NBA players trying to get their abilities back. Charles Barkley getting schooled by a group of awesome girl players, going to therapy, a psychic. That side quest was shockingly good and didn't even have to be in this movie. I also forgot that Wayne Knight was in this, and he's great. I feel like there's actually a lot more going on in this movie that actually works together cohesively compared to the new one, and the new one is working with like 30 minutes of extra screen time. Like, I find the new one both feels like not that much happened, but it also takes way too long to get to the end. So the Toons decide to kidnap Michael Jordan, a recently retired basketball legend turned baseball players, to help save them. It's pretty basic and nonsensical, but seeing as the Looney Tunes basically have near unlimited magic abilities, they could probably make some interesting shows for this amusement park. And Space Jam 2 isn't much better, but the lessons that LeBron has to learn are kind of what saves it. So it starts with LeBron basically being told as a child that if he wants to make it, he has to put aside all distractions and focus on basketball. So when he grows up and has kids, he treats them the same, even though they're in very different situations and they can be provided for and have the ability to pursue their own passions. And while one of his kids is totally okay with being a basketball star, his son Dom is a bit of a tech genius. He loves basketball, but his passion is in game design, and he's made this pretty cool flashy basketball game, and LeBron doesn't get that and sees it more as a distraction hobby. And after a trip to the Warner Brothers studio where a literal personified algorithm has come up with some kind of technology to put LeBron into movies and cartoons through AI, want LeBron to fight Batman? Boom, AI'd. Want to give him a chance to fix Game of Thrones? Boom, AI'd. And LeBron thinks it's dumb, which pisses the AI off. But Dom thinks it's cool. He's super interested in the algorithm and lets slip that he plans to go to E3 camp instead of basketball camp, which LeBron is not cool with, so the two feud and end up zapped into the AI world where Algorithm says LeBron has to beat him in a game of basketball in front of all of his followers so everyone knows who he is. But if he loses, he and Dom have to stay in the serververse forever. I don't know, like, either way you're getting the attention. What are the stakes? Why do there have to be stake consequences if you get what you want? But the movie is more about LeBron's journey to understand his kid and just let him be him, and that's great. Plot to plot, Space Jam New Legacy definitely has more meaning. In Space Jam, Michael is the hero that saves the Toons and gets his mojo back. He also selflessly offers himself up in place of the Toons if they lose. And in New Legacy, the Toons are the helpers, and LeBron has to learn not to inject his own life experience on his kids. But that doesn't make it more enjoyable, it's just a redeeming quality. I imagine some parents watching this with their kid and being like, wow, maybe I should let little Timmy play electric guitar instead of piano. But you know what movie does that better? School of Rock. And before we jump into some specifics, there's one major complaint that I want to address. That adults can't complain about New Legacy being bad because it's for kids. And I disagree. Not all kids' movies are works of art, but a lot of them are fun and completely hold up for adults, and some are legitimately great. Just take a look at the Mitchells vs. the Machines from this year, wildly popular and beloved by kids, critics, and adults alike. A perfect family watch that doesn't overdumb itself down until it's insufferable for the adults, but it doesn't make itself inaccessible to kids either. Space Jam was no Toy Story, but I know it wasn't as insufferable to my mother as some of the other things I watched as a kid. So I disagree with this take. There's some things in New Legacy that are just bad, and I don't personally enjoy it. There are some fun parts, and I'm sure that a lot of families did have a great time with it. But simply being for kids doesn't pull it off the criticism block, and just because there's some nostalgia involved in here doesn't mean that everybody's just like militantly trying to defend their childhood. Sure, some people are, but not me. I don't think this movie is as bad as some people are saying. And I do think that there's like a kid's lens that some movies should be looked through. Like, I'm sure this was a pretty fun theater experience. I actually kind of wish I had gone to some kind of matinee for this movie just to see what the kid reaction was. Like, I went to see Doolittle with like basically entirely families, and kids were not vibing. And I will watch this over Doolittle, I will say. But there's a lot of bad acting, even from people that I know can act. Some moments just really don't land. There's bad dialogue. The tunes are great, but so much falls short compared to the original, in my opinion. And one reason for this is the villains. As dumb as we need to kidnap the Looney Tunes to reboot our amusement park seems to be as a storyline, Looney Tune cartoons are goofy. It works. And these little aliens are great. You've got their menacing overlord, these goofy, adorable little dudes with cute voices and distinct personalities, and they turn into these massive, menacing monsters. They're just all around fun. But Algorithm, my immediate thoughts were, how do you make it seem like Don Cheadle can't act? What in the Spy Kids is this shit?
I know I'm just an algorithm, Pete. That's precisely why I need King James.
Yes! Thank you. Finally, huh? Put some spec on my name, right?
It's like the goofiness of the Spy Kids dude without any of the charm and worse acting. It's like they told him to put on a show for 3-year-olds, but it comes across as someone who can't act, and Don Cheadle can act. So I'm upset. And I hate him as a villain. I understand how this would be totally fine for your average kids movie, but I hated him and I actually expect more from Warner Brothers. He gets less annoying when he's trying to convince Dom that he's this cool, understanding father figure that believes in his goals and thinks he's super talented, but it's literally just to manipulate him, which is great villain behavior, but it doesn't distract away from the fact that he's overall horrible. So he gets Dom to use his game to create an all-star wacky basketball team and soup up his own stats, so while Braun is training the tunes and fundamentals, the game they'll be playing is Dom Ball, which affords points to style, something that LeBron was not prepared for, and these moves are definitely not fundamental. And unlike the Monstars, the Goon Squad is pretty lame. I don't feel like I know anything about them or their personalities. They're just these monstrous looking things that actually don't necessarily seem like they'd be good basketball players. Like, it's a snake. Why would that be? I don't know. Also, my friend Peach pointed out that there were multiple instances where the snake character wraps around Lola Bunny and like kind of licks her and makes like little weird comments, and she seems pretty positive that this was some kind of vor insert from the animators. And I don't know how true that is, but now I can't stop thinking about it. So, yeah. Either way, villains to villains, I give the clear edge, it's not even an edge, the clear win to the OG Space Jam soundtrack. One of the aspects that always comes up when talking about Space Jam is that soundtrack. And for good reason. It's fucking awesome. R. Kelly aside. This soundtrack rocks, even if it did exist just to sell soundtracks. That's fine, because it's good. New Legacy soundtrack, on the other hand, is largely forgettable. There's a couple of nice additions, but nothing that immediately stands out. Like, how hard would it have been to either just reuse, the Space Jam theme song or make a modern day remake of the Space Jam theme song? I hadn't seen this movie in, I'm guessing, 20 years, and I could still remember Welcome to the Jam almost perfectly. Clear victory to Space Jam once again. Which brings us to the tunes themselves. 12G Rhythm bops him to the rejects. He falls through a bunch of different Warner worlds until he lands in Looney Land, or Toon World, I guess. I prefer Looney Land. But the only tune here is Bugs. Al gave all the other tunes the option to go to other worlds and live out more exciting lives in the serververse.
Family's everything.
Spittin'! So Bugs obviously takes this as an opportunity to get the gang back together, even though the rest of them all seem pretty happy where they are. Is this Warner shitting on the Looney Tunes IP and saying that it's lame? Either way, most of the characters are exactly what you'd expect them to be in terms of behavior and humor, and we'll touch on some of their pizzazz a little bit later. But Daffy and Porky are living their life as superheroes in the DC world. Lola is training to become an Amazonian in Themyscira. Sylvester and Elmer are in Austin Powers?
Except 1/8 your size.
And the Roadrunner is literally chilling in Mad Max Fury Road World, which I thought was fun. Criticism and haters be damned. Which brings us to what had to be the central complaint, or at least the central thing that most people are commenting on with this movie, the fact that it feels like one giant advertisement for every single Warner-owned IP. Everything from Cartoon Network to DC to HBO. And I tried to examine both sides. It's very normal for movies to have product placement. It's pretty normal for studios to want to kind of like boost up their other areas. Like, look at iRobot and Transformers for really obvious examples of over-the-top product placement. But every single Warner property is here. Yogi Bear, Gremlins, Scooby-Doo, The Night King, Pennywise, the monsters from the first Space Jam, Batman, Game of Thrones, Harry Potter, Superman, Iron Giant, Harry Potter again, Batman again, Superman again, Justice League, Austin Powers, Rick and Morty, The Matrix, Back to the Future, the Droogs from Clockwork Orange. And what has to be one of the most obscure and weird ones was the Nun from the Devils. Featured quite prominently, which had to be some kind of self-service choice from someone and no advertisement, so respect, I guess. But it's literally like Ready Player One without the source material to justify all these different IPs being slammed into one thing. Even Big Chungus was in this?
Now say, I'm Hutton Wabbit.
And that's okay, it's fine, do your thing. All of these characters are having the time of their lives, and it is so weird to clock some of these random characters that have no business being anywhere near a kid's movie. Like, no child should watch Clockwork Orange. I think I saw Clockwork Orange when I was 15, and even I felt too young to be watching Clockwork Orange. But what I do take issue with is that there was a bunch of people jumping up to say that the original Space Jam was no different. So I was like, maybe I'm just really forgetting something about Space Jam that I didn't realize, but no, I rewatched it and my memory was mostly intact. But I do think some of the counter arguments hold up. People complaining about references that kids won't understand and sexualized jokes, like those are all things that have existed in kids' movies for ages to make the viewing experience more enjoyable for parents because most of it goes over kids' heads, but it's still enjoyable to them. If anything, I think this movie lacks some of that value for adult audiences beyond just simply showing us things that were really popular in the 90s and early 2000s. But then also every other decade. However, to even suggest that the IP integration of the original Space Jam comes close to New Legacy is a lie. Yes, there are a variety of classic cartoon characters at the match, but some of them are actually just like copy and pasted into different areas. It's also cool that there's known characters watching the match in New Legacy, but there's no denying that in the original it felt like an Easter egg type thing, and then in New Legacy it is literally just being like, look at all the things that you can watch on our streaming service. Again, not inherently bad, I can just understand why it might get tiring to some people. But for others, these references are half the fun of the movie, pausing every single frame to try to pick out all these weird things going on in the background. The original has one direct Warner shoutout, a second on-screen reference, a few references to things like Frankenstein, Star Trek, Beethoven, Ghostbusters without actually saying Ghostbusters.
I didn't know Dan Aykroyd was in this picture.
I did get Disney about the Mighty Ducks.
What kind of Mickey Mouse organization would name their team the Ducks?
I'm just gonna go.
That's all, folks.
And probably a bunch of other little things, but nothing that really dominates the scene in the same way we saw with New Legacy. I need to hire a service because I could do it myself, but I'm busy to just sew my sleeves in place. Stay rolled, it's for fashion. The one time they flip into a movie that no kid should have watched was like the 2 seconds that they reference Pulp Fiction. I know a lot of people thought that was a Men in Black reference, but I already knew that it wasn't as a child because Men in Black didn't exist when Space Jam came out. Though I do get it, the sunglasses, they don't really wear sunglasses in Pulp Fiction, but they do in Reservoir Dogs, so I think it's like a mashup, but they're distinctly using the Pulp Fiction music, so it's kind of a done deal. And there's obviously product placement, this scene where Wayne Knight shouts out like 4 brands while MJ consumes McDonald's when one of the brands he mentions is McDonald's stands out.
Get your Hanes on, lace up your Nikes, grab your Wheaties and your Gatorade, and we'll pick up a Big Mac on the way to the ballpark.
But other than that, it seems like the biggest product placement is when Michael Jordan asks about their shoes and says he'll need his to play, and it pans up from his Jordans and they all comment about how nice his shoes are. And even that scene focuses more on the fact that he needs his college shorts for good luck. The Converse advertisements in iRobot are more in your face than Jordans in a movie starring Michael Jordan.
Converse All-Stars, vintage 2004.
So what I'm saying is, I just don't agree with the people that are like, I don't know what you're talking about, the original Space Jam was just as bad for all this shit. Cause no, it wasn't at all. So I think this just comes down to personal preference, whether or not it annoys you that there's this many characters shoved in or that we're going through all of these different Warner worlds throughout the movie. Some people are going to enjoy it and think it's fun, and other people are going to think that it's, annoying. Which brings us to another complaint. Lola. First off, no issues with the redesign. She's an animated bunny. It's literally just when they get upgraded that there's a couple shots where she looks like my personal nightmare fuel, but otherwise she's fine. But this wasn't just a visual redesign. The director specifically said that the original Lola was inappropriate for a child audience because she was like a mix of Betty Boop and Jessica Rabbit. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Yeah, I get that you don't want to make an animated bunny for kids vibe it's sexy, but as a kid who grew up with Lola Bunny, I don't think it affected me negatively or did anything weird. The thing I remember about Lola is that she took no BS from people who disrespected her, and she was like the only one who was actually good at basketball.
You want to play a little one-on-one, doll?
Doll?
Uh-huh.
Don't ever call me doll.
So the director of New Legacy's comment that she wasn't good for kids is just weird to me. Redesign is fine, but they took away all of her fire and personality too. Then there's the issue of replacing the classic voice actress Kath Soucie with Zendaya, who I do like, but is not a voice actress. And it felt weird. It felt like something to purely bring in another audience, but do famous people being the voice actors of cartoons still bring a huge draw? I know I personally don't give a shit, just give me good voice actors. And I'm not gonna blame her for the delivery changes, but I absolutely disagree with the decision to replace the original voice actress. I genuinely don't think there is anything about the original Lola that would suggest that she would be unable to kick ass with Wonder Woman the same way this one is. People were getting very weird about the redesign though. Like, it's a cartoon character. Chill. Ooh, no, I don't find the cartoon character sexy anymore. The world is ending. Which brings us to style. Now, the tunes look great for the most part. There's different animation styles depending on where they've been hanging out. It's only when they're upgraded at the end that they start to look really bad, but I also think they didn't like it, but I don't like that choice. Why would you do that? Why would you do that? But I loved Space Jam for putting animated characters in the real world. Felt cool, it looked cool. Every moment that LeBron James is animated in this is a bad moment. At least leave LeBron not animated. I don't know, that's a personal preference thing though. I'm sure there's a lot of people that have absolutely no issue with it. It doesn't affect the quality of the movie, make it any worse or better. I just don't like it, and that's not why I personally vibe with Space Jam. Okay, maybe I'm taking it too seriously, it's fine. The humor style was also pretty similar to the original Space Jam from the tunes. I think Michael Jordan is a better actor than LeBron, but the tunes were the tunes. I also really like that they took advantage of the very obvious joke of Michael B. Jordan versus Michael Jordan.
But I found Michael Jordan!
That's Michael B. Jordan, the actor.
But then there were some moments in this movie that were genuinely funny, and then they ruined it with some kind of awkward line delivery, awkward piece of dialogue, something that should have just cut after the funny thing happened.
What are we having for dinner? Spaghetti and meatball?
Ow! Oh.
Oh, that's my favorite.
Which I guess brings us to our big conclusion. Algae Rhythm uses Dom's technology to zap literally anyone who looked at LeBron's Insta story into the serververse to also be trapped for eternity if the Toon Squad loses. So significantly larger stakes than the original Space Jam. But I just love that instead of being like, hey, maybe go back to Dom and tell him how you feel and what you've learned, his wife was basically like, you have to kick our son's ass in a basketball match and just completely destroy his confidence. Love you, sweetie. So much like the original Space Jam, and as expected, in the first part of the game, they are just completely being swamped. In New Legacy, this is only made worse because LeBron was so focused on the fundamentals and this game was all about style, which is something the tunes can definitely provide. But LeBron was so focused on those basics that he wasn't taking into account those possibilities and their abilities. He stuck with the tunes when he wanted people like Superman, King Kong, and the Iron Giant. Like, why not use the tunes in the same type of ways and in the ways that they can be used? In Space Jam, Bugs uses the placebo effect with Michael's secret stuff to make the tunes believe in themselves. So they start using their natural wacky abilities to turn the tides. I also distinctly remember drinking out of water bottles like this because of that scene. That's nostalgia. In New Legacy, it's after LeBron realizes that it's the tune trying to be more like him that's what's holding them back, which makes him realizes that he's been holding Dom back. Learning lessons all around. So they finally clue in like, hey, we're Looney Tunes and we can do all sorts of godlike shenanigans of mischief and flair to both mess with the other team and get badass style points. But then they let Porky Pig rap.
How your last name Rhythm and you're still off beat from beginning to the end. I'm here.
Why would you do that? Overall, these parts of the movies are pretty similar. It's just Looney Tunes being loony. It's great. I like a lot of what they do with the tunes in both for flair, but I just prefer the OG Space Jam game. Basically because I think the animation style for the Goon Squad is hideous and I hate looking at it. The Monstars, as I've established, are just better and they have Bill Murray. So I give the slight edge to Space Jam because the animation style looks better to me even though it's significantly dated in areas and there is no Porky Pig rap.
He was spitting hot fire.
The heart. So even though I clearly prefer Space Jam, the meaning at the heart of New Legacy is significantly better. As mentioned, Michael is helping the tunes and offering to put himself up in their place, which is great. But New Legacy is literally LeBron coming to terms with the fact that he's projecting himself onto his kids and not listening to Dom about his true passions, something a lot of parents unintentionally do to their kids. He has to learn that being a good dad isn't just about setting them up for a future to be dominant basketball players like he was, but providing them with an environment to flourish in their passions and be who they are, listen to what they want and not what you think they need. It's not like they don't have the means to let them do whatever the hell they want. They literally have a voice-activated ball distribution machine.
Spaghetti and meatball?
Ow!
So he apologizes and points out how amazing the game he built is and tells him to be himself. So Dom switches sides. The two obviously triumph and it's one last upgrade tossed by Dom that wins the game.
Yes, I never doubted you for a second, LeBron. We are going home.
What did Robin just do in the background? Why? Okay, sorry. Back on track. I have to stop looking at the people in the background. So I was almost super tilted at the end. After all that, Dom's like, nah, I don't want to go to E3 camp. I'm going to go to basketball camp. After being sucked into my own video game, I'm a little bit tired of it. I was like, no way. They're not having him give up his dream and just go to basketball camp after all that. But it was just a little bait and switch where LeBron was like, oh no, I hope I didn't make a mistake because like this is E3 camp. But Dom keeps the ball with him, accepting both sides of who he is, a genius game designer and badass basketball player. Stakes that can only apply to a movie that stars LeBron James. That's fine. So the heart is there. Great message for parents. I just think the execution could have been significantly tightened up and it wasn't as entertaining as I kind of expected it to be. Like it actually just didn't go off the rails into cheesy camp enough. Overall, this movie feels more like IP advertisement with a very strong message at its core that never ends up fully delivering because of what I view as writing issues. Like you can slam a bunch of IPs into something and have it be good. You just need the writing to back it up, and I just don't think this movie did that. Again, not saying that the original Space Jam is a work of art either, but judging them both by kids' movie standards, I'd probably give the original Space Jam a 3.5 out of 5, and I realize that you're probably all screaming nostalgia, but as a kid, I definitely would have given it like a 4 to a 4.5, so I have adjusted my expectations in the rating, but I would probably only give New Legacy a 2.5 at most. But let me know what you think down below. Was it better than expected, or was it somehow worse than you expected, or were your expectations pretty much level with what this movie ended up delivering? Were you fans of the original Space Jam? Do you not give a shit about Space Jam and you're just here to support me like a real one? Let me know down below. Thanks so much for watching. Thanks as always to my Patreon supporters. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. Leave a like on the video if you're into that kind of thing. I hope you're all having a fantastic day. I'm mostly okay, and we'll catch you all later.